मेल रो
मेलटा आसीथिले सर को सेही मेल
हाँ बंद हो जो सेटा चाहू मु देखिए हाँ से कौन बोलते भोग भोग आनी तो कौन सर क्लास रे अच्छे
So shall we start?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. On the behalf of IAP India Technical Team, I welcome you all to webinar on cervical pain, common etiologies and physiotherapy management by Professor Dr. P.P. Mohanty sir. We are live on IAP India YouTube page. You can subscribe to this channel for getting regular updates. During the presentation, if any of you have any questions and queries to the speaker, you can put it in a QA section box. Okay, now the moderator of the today webinar is Dr. Guguna Nandi Pani sir, Secretary IAP Utkal. Now I request to moderator to please start the session.
Thank you. Thank you, IIT Technical Team. As we know, a day with a great teacher is better than 1,000 days of diligent study. A day with a great teacher is better than 1,000 days of diligent study. To ensure the same and taking the advantage of technology, IAP Central Executive Committee and IAP Women's Cell has taken a great leap to help all the physiotherapists and students in and around the globe by organizing this webinar series. I thank our IAP President Dr. Sanjeev Jha sir, IAP Secretary Dr. Annamalai sir, and IAP Central Treasurer and IAP Women's Cell Head Dr. Ruchi Varsne ma'am and their whole team for their great efforts to provide physios, and my special thank to IAP technical team for their untiring and legendary efforts to organize these webinar series for helping not only the physiotherapists but the students and public too by going live in our YouTube channel, that is IAP India. Good afternoon everyone present here on this platform for our first webinar of Utkal IAP Odisha State Branch. I, Dr. Bhuvanananda Pani, General Secretary Odisha State Branch, on behalf of IAP and IAP Women's Cell Utkal Branch, welcome you all to our first webinar series on topic cervical pain, common etiology and the physiotherapy management by the most adorable, the teacher of teachers, the aura of encouragement, a great mentor and a dynamic influencer, a humble guide who should be cherished as an inspiration for whole life, is none other than the head of physiotherapy department at Swami Vivekanand National Institute of Rehabilitation, Training and Research, Professor Dr. Patitapaban Mohanty sir. Sir has more than 27 years of experience as a teacher, as a clinician, as a guide, as a resource person, as a researcher, and he is a patron who has proved his responsibility as a great mentor for so many students, so many physiotherapists, and is an adorable administrator too. He has been ornamented with various awards and titles To name a few, it is the prestigious C.P. Nair Award in 2004, Gopavandhu Seva Award in the state in 2013, etc. He completed his PhD in 2012 from Utkal University, Odisha, and to his credit, he has more than 40 research papers published in various index journals in and around the globe. He has presented around 50 papers in various national and international conferences of physiotherapy, which has been a very good inspiration for the students and the physiotherapists practicing. Sir has also authored many books of academic relevance published by renowned publication houses in India. Few of them can be named as Physiotherapy Secrets, Physiotherapy for Shoulder, Physiotherapy for Knee, a book on managing common musculoskeletal conditions by physiotherapy and yoga together, a book on physiotherapy resources for patients, etc. He has also written general articles about physiotherapy awareness in leading newspapers of the state and has been on air and on screen as a resource person to enlighten not only government but public too on various topics. Before we start, here I would request your good self to kindly put your questions through the chat box present so that the same can be discussed as much as possible by Sir at the end for smooth functioning of the webinar. To prove this common saying, a day with a great teacher is better than 1,000 days of diligent study, I proudly request and welcome Professor Dr. Patitapavan Mohanty sir to enlighten us with the live demonstration webinar of IAP Utkal branch. Over to sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Patra. So good evening to all of you. At the outset, I must thank IAP Central, newly elected IAP Central team as well as Utkal IAP office bearer. We'll be discussing about the cervical neck pain and this physiotherapy management. Before I start, I'll take few minutes discussing the anatomy and little bit of biomechanics of the cervical spine. You know, the cervical spine is divided into upper and lower cervical spine. You know, upper, you have got the atlas axis and you have got the atlanto-occipital joint and atlanto-axial joint. Then C2 below to C7, you have got all typical cervical vertebra. The characteristic feature of this typical cervical vertebra, you know, there is a uncinate process, you know, apart from the other features of the spine. Here what happened, there is uncinate process on both sides of the vertebral body in the upper part, and there is a corresponding facets on the lower part of the vertebral body of the cervical spine that articulate with each other to form the joint of Lachka, which is a synovial joint. So that add extra mobility to the cervical spine, because you know, because of our various functional activities that demand wide range of neck movement. So to facilitate that, probably this uncinate process and the joint of Lachka help. Usually neck pain occur in the lower cervical spine, whereas in upper cervical spine there occur more of traumatic lesion like acceleration or deceleration injury. In case of rheumatoid arthritis, in case of ankylosing spondylitis, the upper cervical spine get involved, but all mechanical neck pain that usually involve the lower cervical spine. You know, in the spine you have got the intervertebral joint and both the sides you have got the facet joint. The intervertebral joint, you know, the joint between the vertebral body, in between you have got the intervertebral disc. In the disc, you know, there is a centrally located nucleus pulposus surrounded by annulus fibrosus. This nucleus pulposus, the composition of the nucleus pulposus is mucopolysaccharide plus water. There is about 85 to 90% of the water and a few fibers embedded within it. So that act as a ball, like in simple machine, you have got the ball and bearing. So that act as a ball and that facilitate the movement in all directions. Movement could be possible in all directions, including your traction. But this movement is at a particular level, the movement is guided by the orientation of the facet joint. It is not that freely movement is possible in all plane. The amplitude of the movement, the direction of the movement at a particular segment is determined by the orientation of the facet. In the cervical spine, the facet is oriented about 45 degrees with the transverse plane. So that allows movement in almost all the three planes, like sagittal plane flexion extension, side flexion in the coronal plane, and rotation in the transverse plane. As you go down, gradually the orientation of the facet increases, and at C7 level, the facet is oriented about 70 degrees with the transverse plane. That means it is almost parallel to the coronal plane. Since it is almost parallel to the coronal plane, then what happens? At the C7 level, almost all side flexion of the cervical spine occur in the C7 level, whereas there occur almost no rotation in the lower cervical spine. Atlanto-occipital joint, is a synovial joint of condylar variety that allows flexion extension, very side flexion possible. Whereas in atlanto-axial joint, which is a pivot type of synovial joint that allows about 90% of all cervical rotation. And in the lower cervical spine, as I have already mentioned, movement is possible in all the three planes. But in lower cervical spine, that is C7 level, almost all neck side flexion occur and almost there is no rotation. This intervertebral disc is a avascular structure. It derives its nutrition from the vertebral body above and below by process of diffusion through the vertebral end plate. Vertebral end plate is a thin fibrocartilaginous structure that separates highly vascular vertebral body from the avascular intervertebral disc. The vertebral body, it has got an outer cortical bone, inside there is spongy bone which is filled up with the blood. It acts as a hydraulic substance, you can say. So for the diffusion to occur, what is required? It requires a pressure gradient, a pressure difference between the vertebral body and the disc space. When the disc pressure is less, then the intervertebral disc absorbs fluid from the vertebral body above and below through the vertebral end plate by a process of diffusion. And when the disc pressure becomes positive, the disc releases the fluid into the vertebral body. Again, same by the process of diffusion through the intervertebral vertebral end plate. So, this pressure difference occur with movements, with change in posture, and with various activities. When you assume a upright posture, by the weight of the body, by the gravity, by the weight of the head and the gravity, the intervertebral disc remain under sustained compression. So the disc pressure is relatively positive and the disc releases the fluid. That is the reason why at the end of the day, throughout the daytime, we assume the vertical posture, upright posture. So the intervertebral disc releases the fluid. That is the reason at the end of the day, the height of the individual is reduced to some extent. Whereas in the night, as you are in lying position, there is no gravitational force acting, there is no muscular activity. So the disc volume is increased, intervertebral disc volume is increased, the pressure is less, it absorbs the fluid from the vertebral body above and below. And at the early morning, as you get up, maybe the height of the individual is increased to some extent. So, for a healthy intervertebral disc, what is required? Movement is required. It requires alternate compression and relaxation. Alternate compression and relaxation of the intervertebral disc is required for the fluid exchange between the two compartments like intervertebral disc and the vertebral body. When there is no movement, say somebody is taking bed rest, somebody because of some disease, some injury, like in case of prolapsed intervertebral disc, our surgeon, the neurologist, they all advise us to take rest. So when somebody lie down in the bed for a prolonged period, there is no movement, there is no gravity on the cervical spine, there is no muscular activity. As a result, what happens? This fluid exchange mechanism is impaired. So when there is no fluid exchange, it doesn't receive, intervertebral disc doesn't receive fresh blood from the vertebral body above and below. It devoid of nutrition and it undergo degeneration. Similarly, if somebody maintain a upright posture with too much of load, muscular activities, in that case what happens? The disc remain under sustained compression. The disc doesn't get the opportunity to relax. So because of the sustained compression, again the fluid exchange is also going to be affected. So the disc, intervertebral disc is devoid of nutrition and it undergo degeneration. So again I repeat, for a healthy intervertebral disc, alternate compression and relaxation required, and this compression and relaxation occur when our head is subjected to gravity, when there occur movements, active movement or maybe passive movement. All joints, they are subjected to various load like gravitational load or the body weight that act. The second major load is that is derived from the muscle activities. As the muscle contract, muscle force has got two major components. One is, if you resolve the force into two components, two perpendicular components, that is F cos theta and F sin theta, the one which is perpendicular to the bone, that help for the movement, and the other one, the horizontal component, that act on the joint as joint compressive load. So when there is no movement or there is too much of movement and too much of load, there is too much of compression or there is complete relaxation at rest, no compression. In either case, the intervertebral disc devoid of nutrition and undergo degeneration. So there should be movement, that should be uniform movement throughout the cervical spine. In all the segments, there should be uniform movement, so that the intervertebral disc got its nutrition, proper nutrition, and remain healthy. Next is the facet joint. On both the sides we have got the two facets. The superior articulating facet of the vertebra below articulate with the inferior articulating facet of the vertebra above on both the sides to form a plain type of synovial joint. Like any joint, hip joint, knee joint, like the facets are lined by articular cartilage. There is a capsule is lined by the synovium. Like intervertebral disc, the articular cartilage is also avascular or neural, and it derives its nutrition from the synovial fluid that is secreted in the joint. So the secretion of the synovial fluid, it depends on what? It depends on intra-articular pressure of the joint. When the intra-articular pressure of the joint is, say, positive, it releases the fluid out of the joint. It releases the synovial fluid out of the joint. And when the intra-articular pressure of the joint is negative, fresh synovial fluid is secreted into the joint, providing nutrition to the articular cartilage. So again, the facet joint also required movement for the synovial fluid secretion and release out of the joint. The to and fro movement of the synovial fluid in and out of the joint that require alternate movements. Then articular cartilage, to derive the nutrition from the synovial fluid, it requires alternate compression and relaxation. When the articular cartilage are compressed, the synovial fluid is squeezed out of it, and when the articular cartilage is relaxed, it receives fresh synovial fluid as nutrition. So again, there is two different things happening. One is the fresh synovial fluid secreted inside the joint, and the used synovial fluid move out of the joint. So that is required like intra-articular pressure, gradient is required. Another one is fresh synovial fluid move into the articular cartilage to provide nutrition, and the synovial fluid, used synovial fluid, should come out of the articular cartilage. So that requires alternate compression and relaxation of the articular cartilage. And for both the things, again, movement is required. When the joint move, any joint, it moves toward the closed pack position. You know, the intra-articular pressure is positive, is the maximum in closed pack position. The articular cartilage are compressed, synovial fluid is squeezed out of it. Intra-articular pressure also become maximum, so synovial fluid is also moved out of the joint. And the closed pack position for the cervical spine is extension, where the facets are completely engaged. And when any joint moves toward the resting position, gradually from the closed pack to resting position, the intra-articular pressure progressively become, reduces, and it is least in the resting position. So what I want to say, from closed pack position to resting position, as the joint moves, fresh synovial fluid is secreted, and that fresh synovial fluid, the articular cartilage receive and derive nutrition from it. So to summarize, your intervertebral disc is avascular, articular cartilage of the facet joint is also avascular. Both derive their the intervertebral disc derive the nutrition from the vertebral body above and below, whereas articular cartilage derive the nutrition from the synovial fluid. So for healthy articular cartilage as well as intervertebral disc, movement, and that is alternate compression and relaxation of the intervertebral disc and articular cartilage is required. Then with aging what happens? As the age advances, the vertebral end plate gradually it becomes hard. The pores within the vertebral end plate are obliterated, so the process of diffusion gradually slow down. As a result, the process of diffusion get affected. The nutrition to the intervertebral disc is going to be reduced slowly. As a result, the intervertebral disc undergo degeneration. And with the degeneration, what happens? There will be loss of mucopolysaccharide, there will be loss of water content, because it is the mucopolysaccharide that absorb the water. So what is the property of this water content then? It absorbs the shock. It attenuates the energy. So as the intervertebral disc degenerate, its water content is reduced, its energy attenuation capacity is also reduced, its shock absorption capacity is also reduced, Then what happens? More load falls over the bone, over the vertebral body underneath. What happens? Since intravertebral disc is avascular, its metabolic capacity, or once it is damaged or degenerated, it cannot be repaired, it cannot be replaced. There occur compensatory fibroblastic proliferation. There occur compensatory bony proliferation. With the loss of mucopolysaccharide and water content, there is progressively increase in the fiber content of the intravertebral disc. And I was telling you, with the degeneration of the disc, as the energy attention capacity is reduced, now more load falls over the bone. So there occur bony proliferation. Lying down of the new bone give rise to marginal osteophyte formation. So with progressive degeneration, progressively the water content is reduced, the fiber content is increased. I was telling you, the nucleus pulposus acts like a ball, responsible for the movement. Now its water content is reduced, means the mobility progressively, with the degeneration, the mobility of the cervical spine progressively reduces. The neck becomes stiff, and that is what known as your cervical spondylosis. Similar changes occur, similar degenerative changes occur in the facet joint also. Articular cartilage is avascular. Its metabolic capacity is poor. It again, once degenerated or damaged, cannot be repaired or cannot be replaced. So when the articular cartilage and how it will undergo degeneration, when it is subjected to, already we have discussed, when it is subjected to sustained compressive load without relaxation, or it is completely relaxed pressure, but it is taking prolonged. As a result, it undergoes degeneration. If somebody, this occupation is such that one has to sit for a long time, and the articular cartilage of the facet joint are compressed in extension, because that for the cervical spine. So if one maintain a neck extension position for a long time, like the computer worker, or maybe somebody is performing by loading activities, in that case the facet joint remain under sustained compression without relaxation. So that may lead to degeneration also. The area which is subjected to sustained compressive load, that undergo degeneration. Again, the reasons start with the loss of mucopolysaccharide. There is loss of water content. There is loss of, with the loss of water content, what happens? The elasticity of the articular cartilage, the energy attenuation capacity of the articular cartilage, the shock absorption capacity of the articular cartilage is going to be reduced. And since it is avascular, it cannot be repaired. Same thing, same compensatory phenomenon occur, like there is fibroblastic proliferation, there is going to be bony proliferation. Lying down of the collagen tissue lead to fibrous thickening of the joint capsule. This is a very slowly progressive process. Degeneration is a slowly progressive process. So over years it occurs. So over year, with the degeneration of the articular cartilage and lying down of the collagen tissue, the joint capsule become fibrous and thickened. With the lying down of the new bone, there also occur in the facet joint new bone, marginal osteophyte formation. So as the joint capsule become fibrous and thickened, inelastic, inextensible, obviously it is going to limit the movement. And the movement is limited in the capsular pattern. The capsular pattern of the cervical spine is, if it is a bilateral capsular pattern, facet joint on both the sides are affected. bilateral symmetrically, then what happens? Extension is more limited than the flexion. Both flexion and extension are limited, but extension and side flexion to both sides are also limited. If it is unilateral facet or asymmetrical facet involvement, one side is more involved than the other, flexion extension become asymmetrical. Normally what happens? As you do the movement, say I do flexion of the neck, then what happens? There will be compression of the bus. So when you do flexion of the cervical neck, then what happens? There occur compression of the anterior part and distraction of the posterior part. Anteriorly, the vertebral body intravertebral disc will be compressed. The gel-like nucleus pulposus tends to move backward, and posteriorly there occur distraction. Posteriorly, you have got the facet joint. So the inferior articulating facet of the vertebra above glide upward over the superior articulating facet of the vertebra below, that occur bilateral symmetrically. Anterior compression is equal to posterior distraction. But in case of unilateral or asymmetrical facet involvement, what will happen? The movement is asymmetrical. Movement is asymmetrical. Suppose the right side is involved, left side is less involved. So left side is going to be distracting almost normally because this is less involved, whereas the involved side, right side, doesn't distract. As a result, what happens? There occur asymmetrical movement. The head sway toward the affected side. Normally, as you do the movement, what happens? Your chin moves toward the sternum, manubrious sternum. But now what happens? There will be a deviation in this case toward the affected side. Similarly, extension become asymmetrical. Normally, as you do extension, there occur anteriorly, there occur distraction, posteriorly compression. The intervertebral disc is compressed posteriorly. As a result, the nucleus pulposus tend to move anteriorly. And posteriorly, you have got the compression, means the facet joint is compressed also. The facets come closer towards each other. The facet joint is compressed and loaded more. The intervertebral foramen size is decreased. And in case of asymmetrical facet arthropathy or unilateral facet arthropathy, what happens? Your extension become asymmetrical. You know, as you ask the patient to do the movement, normally during extension we see the skin creases. The site at which there is skin crease, probably there occur more movement. Suppose there is no skin crease on the other side, in some site, that means there the mobility is impaired. And in case of asymmetrical, this thing you will find asymmetrical skin crease. Right? Asymmetrical skin crease means on the involved side there is a shallow skin crease, whereas on the unaffected side there will be a deep skin crease. And as you do side flexion, suppose right side is involved, so left side flexion is limited, whereas right side flexion is full. Because the right side is involved, right facet fails to glide, so the left side flexion is going to be limited. This is a normal physiological phenomenon that usually occur with aging. Next, you know, in the cervical spine, what happened? The common problem in the cervical spine is degenerative joint disease like spondylosis, the so-called spondylosis. The incidence of prolapsed intervertebral disc is relatively less in cervical spine as compared to the lumbar spine. The reason is you have got a broad posterior longitudinal ligament in the cervical spine. You know, in the spine, the ligaments of the spine include anteriorly you have got the anterior longitudinal ligament, posteriorly posterior longitudinal ligament. Anterior longitudinal ligament is narrower in the cervical region, gradually it become broader as you go down. Whereas posterior longitudinal ligament, just the reverse. It is broader in the cervical region. As you go down, it becomes narrow. Since it is narrow in the lumbar region, it provides poor protection to the disc posteriorly. That is the reason why the prolapse intervertebral disc is relatively more common in the lumbar region. Number two, cervical region, there is less load. Lumbar region, there is more load. So more is the load, more is the wear and tear. But in the cervical region, the movements is more because of our occupation, activities of daily living. There occur too much of neck movement. Probably that is another cause why it gives rise to degeneration of the cervical spine earlier than the lumbar spine. Then there is another reason why lumbar PIVD is more common than cervical. In the nucleus pulposus, in the cervical region lies almost centrally, whereas in the lumbar region it lies posteriorly. It lies posteriorly. Since the nucleus pulposus lies posteriorly, that means posteriorly the annulus fibrosus is narrower and weaker in the lumbar region. So PIVD in the lumbar region is more common. Then the other problem, other cause of the neck pain include, one of the most common cause I'll say, that is your upper cross syndrome. You have got the various ligaments and all that provide stability, that is reinforced by dynamic stability is provided by the muscles. You have got the anterior neck muscles. Superficial anterior neck muscles include your sternocleidomastoid, your scaleni. Similarly, in the posteriorly, they have got the posterior neck muscles, the superficials divided into superficial and deep. Superficially, you have got the upper trapezius, levator, and in the deep, there are very small muscles like multifidus and all, right? So, posteriorly, here what happened? You have got the posterior neck muscle, and anteriorly, you have got the pectoral group of muscle. They form a force couple. They are the postural muscles. They are the tonic muscles. Whereas neck flexor and here the scapular muscles like rhomboids and middle trapezius, they are the phagic muscle responsible for the motion. Normally what happens? This postural muscle, the tonic muscle, they become adaptively short. Whereas the phagic muscle undergo weakness, it become weak. Very fast they become weak. As the phagic muscle become weak, then what will happen? Because of the muscle imbalance, the opposite group of muscle undergo shortening. Or since this postural muscle or tonic muscle, as they become short, it put a inhibitory, inhibition over the antagonistic group of muscle. As a result, the neck flexor become weak. Or I'll put in some other way, usually what happens, normally almost all individuals develop a head forward posture. When the head is forward, your line of gravity fall anterior to the cervical spine. So your gravity acts as a flexor force. Since line of gravity is anterior to the neck, so gravitational force substitute the flexor activity. As a result, the flexor activity is reduced. And to counterbalance that, the posterior neck muscles overwork. It undergo adaptive shortening. Because of the muscle imbalance, they undergo adaptive shortening. So when there is a head forward posture, it is associated with upper cervical extension, hyperextension, lower cervical flexion. Since line of gravity is anterior to the neck, act as a flexor, it creates a flexion moment. So flexor activity is reduced, so flexor become weaker. And with head forward posture, the sternocleidomastoid becomes short. Normally what happens, normal posture, What is the normal posture? How to say the one is having a normal cervical posture? Normally what happens, the simple thing is, if you put a plumb line, simple, you hold a pen from the tip of the mastoid that should pass through the tip of the acromion. In head forward posture, what happens? This no more lie in the coronal plane. Number two, normally what happens? Our sternocleidomastoid, it is oriented. Normally the sternocleidomastoid is oriented upward and backward. This is the orientation. Whereas in head forward posture, this backward oriented, you can see the backward orientation is lost. It becomes vertical or it is oriented upward and forward. And the third thing is, when you make somebody stand against the wall, heel touching the wall, the apex of the thoracic curve touching the wall, then occiput touching the wall, you find the distance of the apex of the cervical curve from the wall is about 4 to 6 centimeters. And in head forward posture, that distance may be increased. So, when there is a head forward posture, over time what happens? The suboccipital, because of hyperextension of the upper cervical spine, the suboccipital structure becomes tight. Suboccipital. Each individual, just keep your finger clasped, keep it over the occiput, elbow, move the elbow close to each other and move the elbow toward the chest. You'll find there is a discomfort, there is a stretching of the upper cervical spine. You'll find there is a discomfort in the upper cervical spine that indicate that this upper suboccipital structure has become tight. Almost every individual will experience that. Then lower cervical spine is flexed. So what we find? We find a kyphotic posture of the cervicothoracic junction. So in the cervicothoracic, extension is going to be limited. So there occurs extension dysfunction of the lower cervical spine, flexion dysfunction of the upper cervical spine, because of this, muscle imbalance, and over time, because of the poor posture over time. And when the lower cervical spine is flexed, it remains flexed for a long time. Over time, then what happens? That may lead to, with flexion, intravertebral disc is compressed anteriorly, it tends to move backward, and that may give rise to prolapse intravertebral disc of the involving the lower cervical spine. Then the other cause of the neck pain is myofascial pain syndrome. That is very common. Almost all individual, even asymptomatic case, you just palpate the parascapular muscle, you will find there is a trigger point. There is a trigger point, silent, that is known as your latent trigger point. In all case of symptomatic patient, maybe prolapse intravertebral disc, maybe spondylosis, maybe postural or whatever, right? Dysfunction. So you palpate around the periscapular muscle, upper trapezius, your levator, rhomboids, you will definitely find there is a trigger point. So this myofascial trigger point is another source of pain. Patient, the individual with neck pain, report to OPD, any OPD, general OPD, with pain going down the upper limb. Whether it is orthopedician, whether it is a neurologist, the diagnosis is prolapse intravertebral disc. But the incidence of PIBD is very rare. Maybe 1 to 2% of the neck pain might be having the prolapse intravertebral disc. So it is the physiotherapist who can better diagnose. Just simply with clinical evaluation, you can better diagnose. In the neck pain, about 85% of the all neck pain is mechanical in nature. The rest 15%, 10% could be due to trauma. Neck trauma is very common. Your your acceleration injury or deceleration injury. You are traveling in a bike nowadays, the youth, they use high speed bike, and when it gives sudden brake, then what happens? The lower part come to rest immediately with the brake, whereas due to inertia of motion, upper part moves, keeps on moving. So that results in a flexion injury. In flexion injury, there is not much problem because the chin touches the sternum. The movement is within the physiological limit. It doesn't go beyond the physiological limit. If the vehicle is suddenly accelerating, then what happens? The body, lower part with the vehicle accelerate, whereas the upper part, because of the inertia of rest, hyperextend. Normal range of this is the normal range of hyperextension, where the face become almost horizontal. But here there is no barrier. It can further hyperextend, go beyond the physiological limit, resulting in injury. Stretching of this all anterior structures. That is the mechanism of a hip plus injury. And your rheumatoid arthritis may also involve the upper cervical spine, ankylosing spondylitis, etc. Few conditions. Otherwise, almost 85% of the neck pain is mechanical in nature, which can only be diagnosed by physiotherapist, which can only be effectively treated by physiotherapy. Person with neck pain, you go to a surgeon, you go to a neurophysiologist or whoever. Immediately they will ask you, go for MRI, and based on the MRI, that irrespective of the cause, the treatment is same. Either you go to take rest, some analgesic, some muscle relaxant, pre-GABA, etc., etc. That is the common prescription all over you'll find. But it is the physiotherapy which can give objective treatment to the neck pain. And to give that objective treatment, you should have thorough knowledge of the biomechanics. One should have the thorough evaluation procedure. You take the history, thorough history, followed by physical examination. Then you come to the diagnosis. Interpreted, right? So, now come to the evaluation. Make the patient sit erect. Most important is you ensure that the subject sit erect. If the starting position is different, see, now you see the head posture. His head is also erect. Normal cervical posture is attained. Now, as you relax, as he relaxes from the lumbar spine, you now see the head goes forward. Again, I repeat, as one assume the extension posture, the neck assume the normal posture. As the lumbar posture alters, the head posture also alters. So when you evaluate the patient without taking care of the general posture of the individual, so time to time your finding may vary. So to have a consistency in your evaluation, ensure that the subject is in erect sitting. You just tap on the lumbar spine so that one become erect. Not only the posture change, the range of motion also change. Now you see, this is the range of side flexion in erect posture. Now bend your lumbar spine, relax, bend. Now you see what happened. The range is different. Okay. Now you erect your lumbar spine, Siddha. Now you see the range is different. The reason is this is in erect posture, that is the normal posture, right? Whereas when with the relaxation of the lumbar spine, the head posture is altered. It becomes forward. Forward means upper cervical spine is hyperextended, lower cervical spine is flexed. So when the lower cervical spine is flexed, then what happens? The facets are no more engaged. Whereas upper cervical spine, maybe the facets are well engaged. So that is how the range of motion is going to be different. So again, I repeat, it should be always erect posture. You see from the front whether the head is in the midline or not. Shoulder level. Shoulder level, most importantly, the clavicle should be horizontal. Shoulder may be level with both the shoulder elevated. Shoulder may be level with both the shoulder depressed, but that is not a normal posture. Normal posture is both the shoulders should be relaxed. Both the shoulders should be relaxed. With clavicle horizontal, most important, clavicle should be horizontal. That determines the normal posture. Or shoulder not level means, one may be raised, other may be depressed. So which is normal? One is depressed, other is elevated. Which one is normal? Which is why it is depressed? Why not? It is why it is elevated? Why it is not depressed? So to determine that, again you have to find out the clavicular orientation. The one in which the clavicle is horizontal, probably that is the normal posture, and the other one is where the clavicle is not horizontal, that is the abnormal, elevated. Or both may be abnormal. Clavicle is not horizontal, this side is depressed, other side is elevated. Both could be abnormal. So that you can determine by checking the orientation of the clavicle. Right? Then from the upper limb you can see, you have to see here from the upper limb whether there is any wasting, any trophic changes in the skin. Yeah. From the back, observation should be done in sitting, preferably in sitting position. From the back, again see whether the head is midline or not, shoulder level, position of the scapula. Normally scapula lies between T2 to T7, to the root of the spine of the scapula corresponding to T3 level. The medial border of the scapula, both sides, is parallel to the midline and away from the midline by 4 to 6 centimeters. Again, you see whether there is any spasm, any wasting, any fibrous band, visible fibrous band may be visible sometimes. Then from the side view, you check the position of the head over the neck, neck over the trunk. For that I have already mentioned. You just the simple thing is you palpate the tip of the mustard behind the ear, tip of the acromion, right? You just hold your pen and see whether this pen lies on the coronal plane or not. When the head is forward, now you see it is clearly visible. What happened? This pen is no more in the coronal plane. It is facing forward. So one has got a head forward posture. Cervical lordosis, thoracic kyphosis, lumbar lordosis, hip flexion, knee flexion, all these things you have to. You have to examine the individual as a whole. Patient has come with neck pain, it doesn't mean that you check the neck posture, neck movement only. Because increase in thoracic spine, thoracic kyphosis lead to cervical, increase cervical lordosis. Increase in lumbar lordosis also is, reflect at the thoracic as well as cervical level. Hip flexion deformity, that may also reflect at the cervical level. So you see the individual as a whole. Because we deal, as a physiotherapist, we deal with the movement, we deal with the posture. We have the knowledge of the biomechanics, we can interrelate, correlate. So you have to treat the individual as a whole. Again, you have to treat the individual as a whole. He has come with neck pain. He doesn't have any, complaint of the lower back, but there is some abnormality. You find on your examination. You treat that, so that maybe some anticipated lumbar pathology can be avoided. You check the cervical spine, treat the cervical spine, then after a few days, maybe patient come with recurrence. Because you are not treating the interrelated problem in the lumbar spine. So that is very important. Then, after checking the posture, you have checked the posture, you have checked the skin for any trophic changes, you have checked the subcutaneous tissue for any wasting, for any atrophy, any spasm. Now, coming to the movement evaluation, the first thing is active physiological movement. So again, make the subject sit in erect posture and ask him to do the movement. Bend, 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 bend. Active physiological movement. See, before doing the movement evaluation, let me tell you, every time you have to find out which movement reproduce the original symptom. We don't look for the pain. Physiological, as you do the movement also, I do my finger movement, I feel the pain. That is a normal response. So you have to explain the patient. See, whenever you feel the original symptom, you let me know. We look for that movement which reproduce the original symptom as a manual therapist. That is very, very important. So ask the patient to do the flexion and see the range, see the movement pattern. Movement pattern is movement occur cephalocordally. पहले अटलांट ऑक्सीपिटल, उसके बाद नीचे movement occur. Movement occur bilateral symmetrically, and movement which the neck flexion, the cervical lordosis is reduced, it is flattened, and finally it is reversed. That is, finally you will find a convexity, posterior convexity. Similarly, ask the patient to do the extension. See the range. The best thing is, if the therapist sit down on the back and see the creases, how many creases, whether the creases are bilateral symmetrical, and what are the label. Again, movement is bilateral symmetrical or not, the range, the pain response, again original symptom is reproduced or not. Then ask the patient to do the side flexion, bend the head to side and see the range. Normally what happens, the ear should come in contact with the tip of the shoulder and see the range, see the pain response. Then next is both sides. Then you ask the patient to do the rotation. Can you turn your head? Again, the normal range is the chin should come to the level of the tip of the shoulder. So suppose your active movement, you have checked the active movements, there is no original pain is not reproduced. Suppose somebody is having pain even at rest, then what happens? The original pain may aggravate. You are looking for two things. At rest there is no pain, original pain will be reproduced. At rest there is pain means that original pain should be aggravated. Suppose active movement is not informative, it doesn't give any information. What is that information? Information is original symptom. Then you apply overpressure. At the end range you apply overpressure and see the response. See the response means again original symptom. No, original symptom is not reproduced. Then we will go for the passive movement. For passive physiological movement is usually we give it in so. Head down, head up, with the head down, head out of the bed, also put to chin grasp, relax, give the movement, flexion, extension, then side flexion, rotation, all the direction you give the movement, check the range, feel the resistance and pain response. Movement is not reproducing the symptom even with overpressure. Then what do? You can go for the combined movement. Combined movement, extension is combined with side flexion and rotation. So let me tell you, we are dealing with the mechanical problem, and mechanical problem, the original symptom is reproduced with mechanical deformation of the structure, and mechanical deformation occur with loading. So probably active movement doesn't load the involved tissue to that extent to reproduce the symptom. with passive overpressure also doesn't load the tissue to that extent that reproduce the original symptom. That means that load is inadequate to reproduce the original symptom. Then we'll go for the combined movement. Extension is combined with side flexion, rotation. With this combined movement, what happens? Your facet is loaded to a greater extent. IV foramen is reduced to the maximum extent. Maybe the pen is going to be reproduced. If still not, then we apply compression. We test the movement under compression. Apply axial compression and you can check the movement. Physiological movement and combined movement can be checked. Then next is joint play. Petition. Oh. So subject is prone, usually bed with breath hole is useful in this case. Then the surface marking for the palpation of the spine is C1 doesn't have the spinous process. Below the occiput, the spinous process you feel is C2 spinous process, right? The first bony prominence you feel below the occiput is C2 spinous process. You place your thumb over the spinous process, press it posterior anteriorly, and try to note the amplitude of the glide, posterior to anterior glide, the resistance you feel, and most importantly, whether the original symptom is reproduced or not. Like that, C3, C4, at different level, you check. Next is, this is your central pay pressure. Next is unilateral pay pressure. Palpate the spinous process, go little laterally, you are over the articular pillar, then press. As you press it, say on the left side, the vertebral body rotate to the right side and see the amplitude, feel the resistance and the pain response. So different level you check. Then the third one is your transverse pressure, that is therapist stand by the side, place your thumb by the side of the spinous process and push the spinous process from right to left or from left to right. So as I push the spinous process from the right to left side, the vertebral body rotates to the same side, right side. Again, note the amplitude, the resistance you feel, and the pain response, whether the original pain is reproduced or not. Then, sometimes what happens? There occurs some vestibular problem giving rise to symptom like cervical spine. So to exclude that, what do? You keep the head fixed. You keep the vestibule fixed by keeping the head fixed. Then the body to rotate. So ask the subject to turn the trunk. So there occur exclusively movement occur in the cervical spine without any disturbance to the head or to disturbance to the vestibule. So if the symptom is reproduced, probably that is of cervical origin, not vestibular in origin. Then there may occur, vertebrobacillary insufficiency that has to be also excluded. Through the foramen transversalis, vertebral artery passes on both the sides, comes out at the level of C1. It forms a loop on both the sides before entering through the foramen magnum into the, and you join together to form the bacillary artery and circle of Willis. So what happens when this vertebral artery is compressed? Sometimes it is filled, it is stretched, loop on both the sides because it allows wide range of neck movement without being compressed. When it gets compressed, obviously the circulation to the brain is affected. It supplies to the cerebellum and the posterior occipital region. Occipital region में आपका field होता है. So patient complain of balance problem, because it supplies the cerebellum. If patient complain of some visual problem like blackout, double vision, blurring of the vision, since it supplies the occipital region. It can be tested in sitting, but I always prefer testing this vertebral for BBI, vertebrobacillar insufficiency in lying position, because you have to explain the patient. See, during this maneuver, you may experience blurring of the vision, double vision, blackout, nausea, reeling of the head. Then patient may complain, or finally patient may develop loss of control. So if those symptoms develop in sitting, it becomes difficult for us to manage the situation. If it occurs in the lying position, then you are safe. Make the patient lie down, raise the leg, so we are safe. So supine. ऊपर पड़े. With all explanation, आप ऊपर पड़े. Extend the neck. Keep on asking the patient, do you feel any discomfort? Hold it about 30 seconds, no. Then you go for the rotation, combine with rotation. Again, hold for some time, 30 seconds. If patient develop any discomfort, no, then you can add side flexion. Rotation is more important component. So that exclude no symptom, that exclude your BBI. Next is neuromuscular evaluation, like sensation, check the sensation that C5, C6, then middle finger C7, then C8, like that. Then various muscle testing you have to do. Then your reflexes, plantar reflex you have to test sometimes, cervical cord compression. Very often we get. So plantar reflex, your DTR. Then next is your neural tissue tension test, upper limb neural tissue tension test you have to check. Like for the median nerve, you depress the shoulder, abduct, then elbow extension, forearm supination, wrist extension. Patient may complain of pain at any stage. If no discomfort, then finally ask you bend the neck to the opposite side. There is discomfort, right? Then the test is positive, and when the head is bent to the ipsilateral side, discomfort subside. Similarly, for the radial nerve, depress the shoulder, abduct with slight extension. Next, elbow extension, forearm with supinated, wrist flexed. Whereas for the ulnar nerve, that ulnar nerve passes behind the middle epicondyle, so elbow flexion is required. Abduction with slight extension, elbow is flexed, supinated forearm and wrist flexion. So you have completed your evaluation. Now coming to the diagnosis, how to make the diagnosis. Just one more thing I want to add. During movement evaluation, you can go for the repeated movement, chin talking. Hold for some time, relax, and see whether the original symptom is reproduced. If original symptom is reproduced, ask the subject to do repeated chin talking. And what happened to that? You can do all this, those movements which you have done, extension, you are checking, symptom reproduced, then ask the patient to do repeated extension and see. Now coming to the interpretation and conclusion, somebody come with a complaint of neck pain. Say unilateral neck pain, maybe sudden onset or insidious onset. Patient is somewhere middle range, middle age, 50 to up maximum 50 to 60. Beyond 60, what happened? Your disc is fibrous. the nucleus pulposus is no more water content is no more there or no more gel like to prolapse. 60 years के बाद PIBD नहीं होता है. Your MRI shows that is a different thing, right? That probably the annulus bulge, annulus is torn and that compressed, but it is not your so-called prolapse intravertebral disc or herniated disc lesion or your Mackenzie's derangement syndrome. So now coming to the diagnostic features of prolapse intravertebral disc, as there are two concepts based on which clinically you can diagnose the PIBD. One is as per your Cyriax concept, patient is somewhere less than 60, sudden onset of neck pain, maybe unilateral neck pain. After some time, the pain radiates down the upper limb. By the time he complains of upper limb pain, there is no neck pain. And on posterior evaluation, we will find there is a deviation of the neck. The neck deviates away from the painful side. And on movement evaluation, we will find extension, side flexion to the affected side, and rotation, reproduce the original symptom. And coughing, sneezing may reproduce the symptom, and upper limb lateral tension is positive. As per, there is another concept, that is your Mackenzie concept. In Mackenzie concept, your PIBD is otherwise known as the common site is posterolateral. So posterolateral derangement syndrome set to the right side, which is characterized by centralization of the pen with repeated movement in the direction of derangement. Ask the subject to tuck the chin, and with repeated movement, that pen, suppose to start with, patient complain of pain in the forearm. With repeated movement, the pain is gradually shifting proximally. That is what known as centralization. Or the pain remaining same in the forearm, its intensity over time may be reduced. Or if extension is reproducing the symptom, with repeated extension, we will find there occurs centralization. That is the diagnostic feature of PIBD. Then what is the management? PIBD involves tearing of the annulus fibrosus, through which the nucleus pulposus bulges. You have to treat it like a soft tissue injury. Usually, the physician say, you go and take rest. Surgeon say, you have to go for the immediate surgery. And some people say, you have to wait. For physiotherapy, you have to wait till the pain subsides. But I say, you give physiotherapy, you give just 2 days rest. 2 days bed rest is as good as 2 months bed rest. That is what literature says. Then after 2 days, you start physiotherapy. You have already mentioned, with rest there occur all deconditioning. With rest, the fluid exchange between the intravertebral disc and the vertebral body is affected. For healing to occur, the nucleus to heal, it requires nutrition. The disc requires nutrition, and that nutrition to be facilitated, movement is essential. With rest, nutrition to the torn annulus will be impaired and healing is going to be affected. So what is the treatment for that? As per Mackenzie, you go for the repeated chin talking, repeated extension exercise, and Cyriax says to give traction. Cyriax recommend you give traction. And in the initial stage, sustained traction is given, and that should not exceed more than 10 to 11 minutes. Right? Then what we do, in addition to this thing, just show. Just petik, शीघ्र time नहीं, बहुत time है. हाथ क्रॉस कर दे, आगे छत्ती आगे पूरा क्रॉस कर. So what we do, since there is an injury, this is nothing but injury to the annulus pulposus. So Maitland says no mobilization. In subdisc lesion, nucleus pulposus injury, no mobilization should be given. Simply we go for the stretching of the levator scapulae. You curve the arm so that what happens? The muscle remain under initial stretch position. We keep your heel of the hand at the level of the medial angle of the scapula where levator scapulae is inserted, and we press it outward and downward. Just sustain. Or it can be combined with MET. How it helps? If you remember that biomechanics, pathomechanics of upper crust syndrome, which we have discussed, probably in that way it helps. There is a upper cervical extension, lower cervical flexion. So we try to correct that. Probably that helps in this sense. Yeah, next is, cervical spondylosis. Cervical spondylosis, it usually occurs in elderly person. There is progressively, there occurs stiffness of the neck. Though the pathology is progressive, but the symptom is not progressive. It can occur suddenly. Usually it occurs suddenly. Why it occurs suddenly? When there occur progressive stiffness, progressive narrowing of the IB foramen, progressive narrowing of the lateral recess, the nerve root get accommodated within it. Even a very narrow lateral recess or narrow IB foramen, it get accommodated itself without being compressed. Then when the individual do some overactivities, unaccustomed activities, or sustain some injury, not a known injury, some unknown injury like humps, or traveling in a jerky road or over journey, that may give rise to the symptom. So what is the problem? Problem is stiffness. So your Maitland mobilization is the best thing. Maitland mobilization is the best thing in this case. So that it involves the lower cervical spine. Typically, you will find the side flexion is grossly limited, extension is grossly limited. So to restore the extension, central peer pressure can be given. You place your thumb over the spinous process and press it. Rhythmic oscillatory mobilization should be given. If you want to improve this side flexion, so you can give transverse pressure. Usually transverse pressure is given at the spine by the side of the spinous process, which is translated into rotation. But you can give transverse pressure by the side of the, maybe the transverse process, so that it will be translated into side flexion mode, or maybe articular pillar. Place your thumb by the side of the articular pillar or maybe the transverse process, whichever you find comfortable, and press it from left to right or right to left. But Mackenzie's side flexion mobilization is also useful. Place your metacarpophalangeal joint of the thumb articular pillar, the other hand by the side of the head on the opposite side, then forearm are parallel almost, and to at the end range of side flexion, you try to push the articular pillar from the right to left. Like that, it can be given. So with this rhythmic mobilization, what happens? Maitland rhythmic mobilization, those fibrous structure will be elongated. You are loading, under load, the tissue elongate. So the fibrous tissue get elongated, number one. Number two, your rhythmic mobilization, you are facilitating the mechanoreceptor present. You are trying to correct the posture. So, and when the joint range of motion is improved, the pressure over the nerve root will be relieved, and that may help in correction of these things, relief of the pain. And if there is a myofascial pain syndrome, the simple thing is to go for the stretching. Myofascial pain syndrome is a highly irritable focus, compression of which reproduce the original symptom. So you try to release that. You can go for the deep transfer friction massage, you can give for certain compression, you can use your MET technique. So usually it involves, suppose it involves the levator scapulae. Again, same thing I will do. Place my thumb at the site of the medial angle of the scapula, reinforced by the other hand. I press it outward and downward along the direction of fiber of the levator scapulae. Ask the subject to raise, take a deep breath and raise your shoulder. Little, take a deep breath, try to raise your shoulder, which is resisted by the therapist. As he relaxes, push the middle angle of the scapula downward and outward, and again repeat for 10 to 15 repetition. It should be given. That does the wonder. Chalo, wow. And in upper crust syndrome, again you have to find out which is the problem. You may have to go for the Maitland mobilization to restore cervical lordosis, because cervicothoracic junction there is a kyphosis. You may have to stretch the subscapular, suboccipital structures. You may have to stretch the side flexors like the upper trapezius and levator. Then neck flexor strengthening, chin tucking exercise can be given. And to restore the, correct the thoracic kyphosis, bilateral arm elevation also help. As a home exercise program, you can ask the subject to do bilateral arm elevation. Dr. Pani is indicating the time is all over, so I have to conclude. So if there is any question, we should go for the question answer session. Yeah.
Hello.
देखिए सुबह बने हमको ना.
Hello.
Hello.
So you are not audible.
Am I audible, ma'am?
No, sir.
Not audible.
Am I audible now, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sir Pranam, thank you very much for your wonderful session. You have always been, as ever, your classes have been excellent, and this one is no different. With your unique style of demonstrating everything practically, I am sure that everyone present on the forum would have been enlightened with the topic which you have discussed. Thank you very much for that. And there
Thank
are a
you.
few questions, but due to the lack of time, we won't be able to discuss the questions. But I would request each of the therapists to post their questions on the Utkal IIP email, so that we could answer. We will send the questions to PP sir, and he would send us the answers, and we would share it with you all. And I would like to present the vote of thanks. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of the Utkal IAP and the esteemed delegates of the webinar, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the Honorable Resource Speaker, Dr. P.P. Mohanty sir, who blessed us with his presence and took out valuable time of his busy schedule to share his vast clinical knowledge and practical experience regarding the discussed topic with us. Thank you very much, sir, for presenting us with such a wonderful webinar. I must
Thank
mention
you.
a deep sense of appreciation for Dr. Bhuvanand Nandapani sir for his immense effort and work in making this webinar being conducted in such a smooth and hassle-free manner. Thank you very much, sir. Also, I would like to extend a special thanks to Dr. Sthiti Pragya Dalbehra ma'am, the president of Utkal IAP, for being a constant support and source of inspiration and giving me complete freedom in organizing this webinar on behalf of Utkal IAP. Thank you very much, ma'am. A special thanks to the IAP technical team who have supported us immensely with regards to the technical and logistic aspects of the webinar, without which this webinar couldn't have been that exemplary as it has been. Thank you very much to all the members of IAP technical team. I also wish to express my gratitude to our beloved Central IAP President Dr. Sanjeev Jha sir and all other respected office bearers of the Central IAP for providing constant encouragement and support in this endeavor. I am very grateful to the Central IAP for giving us an opportunity to organize this event. Thank you very much. As no program can become successful with a few individuals, so I extend my big thanks to all the esteemed delegates for their presence and support. Thank you all for making this event successful with your contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of IAP technical team, thank you, Monty sir, for sharing informative knowledge and all participants for attending this webinar. I would also like to thank our IAP President, sir, Dr. Sanjeev Jha, sir, and IAP Technical National Head, Dr. Ruchi Vashni, ma'am, for providing a platform for sharing the knowledge. I request to all participants, please subscribe our YouTube channel and Facebook page. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.